10 minutes of random Earthworm Jim facts. According to a Twitter post, it turns out that 2 cows from the Well Done screen in Earthworm Jim 2 are actually from a safety training manual. It is unknown what the manual is named, but we could see the cows in higher quality. According to an obscure gaming magazine, it mentions that Earthworm Kim, the final boss of the game, was originally meant to be a love interest for Earthworm Jim. It was unknown why it was changed into her being Jim's fed inside of his brain, but fans love the character as it leads to one of the best fan theories about the character. In the special edition version of Earthworm Jim 1, there are specific outfit cheats the player could type in that changes his appearance. One of these happens to be Donkey Kong's head, but with an arrow through it. It's unknown why this is there, but people could speculate that it could possibly be rivalry between Rare and Shiny, as a year later, when Donkey Kong Country 2 came out, they did reference Earthworm Jim with a no-hopers screen. Dan Casanella, who's famous for his role as Homer Simpson from the popular television series The Simpsons, actually voiced Earthworm Jim for the television series and for Earthworm Jim 3D. In the level, for Pete's sake, the main destination is at Peter Puppy's house, and that's where the level ends, but if you whip him across his house, you could still continue on the level, where it gets a bit more challenging, but you can get some extra items. Earthworm Jim's character model in Earthworm Jim 3D is actually based off of the 1995 action figure of the character, except it had to be squished for the N64 release, except in early screenshots and footage of the game, it resembles more of the action figure. Although Princess What's-Her-Name doesn't have a name and was meant to be a joke about damsel in distresses, in the Fight the Fish book made by Doug TenNapel, it is revealed that her name is Luna, at least her new name. In the Doug TenNapel books, it is stated that Planeta de Aqua, or Planet of Water, was once known as Planet of Soil. That was until Bob's Killer Goldfish came in, brainwashed everybody, and flooded the entire place full of water, allowing him to brainwash all of the other residents of that world. It is unknown that if this is true for the TV show lore, as the Doug TenNapel lore is more of a remake of the franchise. When the game was almost finished, Sega ended up calling Shiny at last minute, telling them to add an extra level in their version of the game for exchange of cartridge cost, this leading to the creation of Intestinal Distress. And no, it wasn't cut from the Super Nintendo version because of blood and gore, but instead was an exclusive deal with Sega. In the original TV show, there's a scene where 2 bank robbers end up robbing a bank, which then one of them ends up saying a certain line.
It's like those French guys have a whole other language.
That line is actually a reference from the movie Pulp Fiction. In Earthworm Jim Beyond Groovy's teaser, Jim mentions that he's been in rehab for 25 years. 2021 minus 25 is 1996, which is when the last season of the show was released, but it's unknown why if Earthworm Jim went to rehab, if he was joking or if he was being serious. In the TV show and the reboot book, the town that they live in is called Turlock. This is based off of a real-life small town known as Turlock, except the words are altered, and yes, it is a farming community. Despite his appearance in the TV show and being one of the more unique villains in the franchise, Evil Jim actually appeared as a boss in the game Earthworm Jim Menace to the Galaxy. He would have had an action figure as well, but the second wave was cancelled, but prototypes do exist of him. In a gaming article back in 1995, there was a contest they held known as the Worm Eating Contest. This contest was that they would send the reader a candied worm and they would have to take a picture of themselves eating it in order to win a prize. To this day, it's unknown who the winner is and what the prize was. Professor Monkey Forehead's monkey part of his body actually has a name, and its name is Monkey with the Professor for a Head. They only mentioned this in the TV show, but it's not known if it's canon in the Doug TenNapel reboot books. If the player clicks certain buttons in Earthworm Jim 2, they could trigger the Manta Shield. It somewhat blocks projectiles, and they did reference it in the TV show, but it's unknown if any future Earthworm Jim game will bring back the feature. In a Japanese game show known as Game Center CX, there was an episode of the show where they all played Earthworm Jim. The thing about it is Earthworm Jim was never released on the Mega Drive in Japan, but it was released on the Super Famicom in Japan, thanks to Takara. Earthworm Jim's birthday is actually on June 9th. That's of the character's birthday, not of the game's release date. But it is known that December 22nd was the release date of Earthworm Jim 2, while Earthworm Jim 1 was released somewhere around August and October. In early concept art of Earthworm Jim 2, there is meant to be a level known as Fat Jim, which would have featured a Earthworm Jim in a fatter suit. The level was scrapped because of cartridge limitations with the sprites, but the concept might have been reused for one of the episodes where they used the Fatomic Ray Gun. In the Assault Battery episode of Earthworm Jim, there actually is an animation error where the bathroom they go into is actually a women's bathroom and instead of a male's bathroom, but this does lead to speculation on a specific theory. Evil the Cat was actually one of the very first villains of the franchise, and predates Earthworm Jim by 2 years, with his own comic known as They Call Him Evil. In Clay Fighter 64, Earthworm Jim got to appear as a playable fighter in the game. This was because Interplay owned the rights to Clay Fighter, so they are able to throw in Earthworm Jim after they claim the rights to that franchise. There's a running gag in the show where they break the fourth wall every now and then by talking to the narrator or mentioning something about them being in a show. In the TV show and video game, it is explained that Queen Slugfurbutt is indeed Princess What's-Her-Name's sister, although in the Doug TenNapel reboot books, they ended up making that Queen Slugfurbutt is Princess What's-Her-Name's supposed mother, until later on she ends up encountering her real parents. In Special Edition, there is an exclusive level called Big Broody. In the level, there's a creature called Broody. This is referenced and named after of the art director, Nick Broody. In Earthworm Jim 30, the player goes to the Pacific part of the hub and jumps from a high area in helicopters to one part of the map. They can actually glitch themselves into the final boss fight of the game. This is done by several speedrunners in the speedrunning community. In the leaked April build of Earthworm Jim 2, there were several pre-rendered graphics that were cut from the game, probably because the game was somewhat rushed since it came out 1 year after the first game's release. In the special edition version of Earthworm Jim 1, there's actually several endings for the game depending on what mode the player played on. If the game is beaten on difficult, Doug TenNapel congratulates the player for beating the game on the hardest setting. If the game is beaten on normal, the player gets the normal ending, except with better animation. But if you beat it on easy, then you get a lesson about earthworms. In the early version of Earthworm Jim 30, the main worlds would have been fear, aggression, childhood memories, happiness, and fantasy. Aggression somewhat got reworked in the memory, and not that much is known about childhood. If the player uses a debug cheat in Earthworm Jim 3D for the weapons, they can activate 2 unused weapons, that being a flamethrower and a bubble gun. It's unknown why these 2 are cut, but there's early concept art showing off other weapons, showing how much of the game was removed. The reason why the graphics for the first 2 Earthworm Jim games looked impressive was actually because they were using a process known as Animotion, where they actually drawed out the graphics and put it into a machine. They did this with the Aladdin video game for Sega Genesis. In the April build of Earthworm Jim 2, New Junk City actually appears as a level, but in somewhat of a playable state. The level is actually named Alien Abduct. It's unknown if this was meant to be a placeholder or prototype of Utterly Abducted. Back in 1995, a pilot for the Earthworm Jim television series was made to demonstrate how they should be drawing off Earthworm Jim. This pilot was lost for a couple years until it appeared out of nowhere on YouTube. This was a big discovery for the Earthworm Jim community. The Genesis version of Earthworm Jim 1 and the Super Nintendo version of Earthworm Jim 2 ended up appearing on a Nintendo eShop on a Nintendo Switch, but the games are given a T for teen rating, most likely because of the 90s humor. Around 2003, Interplay had plans for a 4th Earthworm Jim game for PlayStation 2 and the original Xbox. It didn't get past the concept art stage, but had some interesting concepts. This game was most likely scrapped because of Interplay's plans for the now known Fallout Van Buren game, which was also cancelled because of Interplay going bankrupt. Going back to the topic of Earthworm Jim 3D speedrunning, the world record for 100% complete game of Earthworm Jim 3D is done by someone known as Starlight Alice, as their world record was 1 hour and 44 minutes. As of now, she holds the first place of Earthworm Jim 3D speedrunning 100% complete run. Even though the show only ran for 2 seasons / 23 episodes, the show was originally meant to run for 65 episodes, but these plans were scrapped. Due to them having a mixed audience, basically, and not getting the main demographic like shows like Pokemon were getting, so the show was entirely cancelled, and this also led to the cancellation of the action figures line, but prototypes of the action figures do exist. The reason why the Game Boy Advance versions of Earthworm Jim 1 and 2 suck is for a reasonable reason. The first game had a rushed development and didn't have the original source code, while the second game was outsourced to a Russian company. Originally, when Earthworm Jim 3D was in development, there was actually going to be a PlayStation version of the game. This was dropped during development. The Chip Buddy is an item the player could get in Earthworm Jim 2 that increases their health to 200% for a limited time. This is actually based off of a real-life dish known as the Chip Buddy, which is made with potatoes and bread in the UK.